Hello everyone, it is Friday, and that means it is time for this week's MTG Top 10. This week, we are looking at the top Artificers in Magic's history. There are not a ton of Artificers right now, only 54 have ever been printed, but that is about to change. Soon, Kal Adesh will be out, and it seems to be filled with Artificers. Indeed, it even seems the Artificer creature type is getting some attention, and so far a few cards have been spoiled that give you a payoff for having Artificer creatures. The fact that Kal Adesh is pushing the Artificer creature type made me wonder, what are the best Artificers in the history of Magic? So I did some research and came up with this list. Frequently, these lists are determined purely by the success a card has had at the Premier level, at Grand Prix and Pro Tours, but there are only 8 Artificers who've had success there, so number 9 or 10 were open for me to pick a couple of cards. I still chose cards that were powerful and saw a lot of play somewhere, but to see what I mean, let's look at our number 10 card. At number 10, we have Gearcrafter. This guy, and a few other cards on this list actually, are cards from Magic Origins, where we got our first glimpse at the plane of Kal Adesh. It is no coincidence that this guy is an Artificer, since there are apparently so many on the plane. While the Gearcrafter never found victory at a top-tier constructed event, he was an incredibly powerful red common in Magic Origins, and probably one of the best common creatures in the set. If you ever saw one late in a draft, you knew red was open. Anyone who played the format may have even found themselves first picking the guy in a few weaker packs. In Limited, a creature who provides 2 separate bodies at a good rate, especially when one of them has evasion, is pretty powerful, and Gearcrafter is just that. At number 9, we have another card that hasn't seen a top 8 in a mainstream format, but it does see a lot of play in a rather popular format, and that is Carapace Forger. It's a card that sees a lot of play in one of the top tier decks in the Pauper format, a format where all the cards in the decks must be commons. There, it shows up in affinity decks that can easily make this Artificer into a 2-mana 4/4. Also, this card is our first example of an Elf Artificer, something we're going to see a lot more of in Kal Adesh. At number 8, we have our first card with the Premier Event Top 8, and Grand Architect has exactly one. Grand Architect actually has 2 creature types we've seen a lot of in Kal Adesh, Vedalken and Artificer. This guy got his one top 8 in 2012 in a deck named after him that was piloted by Brad Nelson, and it was called Mono Blue Architect. The deck played a bunch of blue creatures and sought to quickly play cards like Phyrexian Metamorph, Wormcoil Engine, and Batterskull with the mana. More recently, the card has seen some fringe play in decks that try to create infinite mana using Pilipala in conjunction with the Architect in Modern, but that deck hasn't made a top 8 just yet. It could happen at some point though, as the card does, I think, have the potential to be busted. At number 7, we're going way back in Magic's history to Mirage, where we can find Goblin Tinkerer. As you can probably see, the Tinkerer doesn't actually say Artificer on it. That's because it was only introduced as a creature type much later in Magic's history. But this Tinkerer has been appropriately errated to have the creature type of Artificer, which makes sense flavor-wise. This guy may not look much to us right now, but in 1997, when he was in the main deck of Paul Firker's aggro deck and Mirage block constructed, he was pretty good. The guy was a Goblin, which was a relevant creature type in the block, and he could also blow up some commonly played cards in the format, like Snake Basket, Sand Golem, and Amber Prison. After being in the top 8 of that Pro Tour, though, the Tinkerer was gone for about 8 years before he emerged in a Legacy Goblin deck at Grand Prix Philadelphia in 2005. This deck ran a split of 2, with one in the main board and one in the sideboard. Kind of like the deck that it had top 8'd with years earlier, the Tinkerer had a relevant creature type and also destroyed a ton of problem artifacts. Only now it was even better because it could destroy several that had a converted mana cost of 1 or less, so it could survive destroying them and then destroy another one. The chief ones among them were Aether Vial, Cursed Scroll, Lion's Eye Diamond, and Pithing Needle. Once this guy can blow up artifacts, he actually gets pretty good. However, he hasn't made another appearance since then, since there are better ways to destroy artifacts in Legacy and Vintage, and I don't think he'll be improving his resume anytime soon. At number 6, we have another card from Magic Origins that gave us a preview of Kal Adesh. This card was a really good card in Origins Limited, and it also saw a bit of play in Constructed, compiling 2 Grand Prix top 8s and 1 Pro Tour top 8. It reached the top 8 in a deck at Pro Tour Magic Origins, the blue-red deck built around Insole Artifact. Making the Thopter token into a 5/5 was pretty potent, as was giving all of your other artifact creatures haste. It also showed up in a Mardu mid-range deck at Grand Prix Oakland earlier this year, and a Grixis Dragons deck at Grand Prix Houston. Neither of these decks really took advantage of the haste aspect, but the fact that it generated 2 bodies at an efficient rate, and one of the bodies had flying, and haste, the token it makes always has haste, and it could also block effectively on the ground, so that made the card attractive to a couple of decks. At number 5, we have yet another card from Magic Origins. It should be no surprise that there are so many Artificers in Kal Adesh once we go back and look at these cards. This one was a legitimate bomb in Origins Limited since it gave you 4 power, 2 of which had flying, for 4 mana, while also having the potential to make creatures unblockable. It's very hard to beat if you get it played against you. It also got 2 Pro Tour top 8s at Pro Tour Magic Origins, where it appeared in two blue-red and soul artifact deck lists. Basically, it was good for the same reason Stopter Engineer was. While the Engineer had one more Premier Event top 8 finish overall, the fact that this one managed 2 Pro Tour top 8s, while the Engineer only got one of those, and was a bomb in Origins Limited, a card that you were actually very happy to first pick in Origins Limited, makes Whirler Rogue a little bit better for me. At number 4, we have another Goblin Artificer. Just like Goblin Tinkerer, this had the Artificer creature type added later on, so it has it now. This card was actually kind of ridiculous, and was used to cheat huge artifacts into play, starting all the way back in 1999, when Urza's Block Constructed was the format. Urza's Block was an artifact-heavy set, just like Kal Adesh is going to be, and there were plenty of crazy things that the Welder could do for you. It had 2 top 8 finishes at the Block Constructed Pro Tour New York that year, where it was used to cheat the monstrous Phyrexian Colossus into play while you sacrificed some unimportant artifact like Ticking Gnomes or Claw of Gix. It next appeared on a Pro Tour top 8 when it won Pro Tour New Orleans in 2003, which was an extended Pro Tour. There, it was used to cheat monstrous artifacts into play like Bosch, Iron Golem, Pentavis, and Platinum Angel. In 2005, it appeared at another extended Pro Tour, where it was now also cheating Sundering Titan into play. The Welder then took a bit of a vacation before re-emerging in 2011 and making its legacy debut at a Grand Prix, where it was used in the Painter Servant Grindstone combo to make it more difficult for people to break it up. Both of the pieces of that combo are artifacts, so if one of them gets destroyed, you can just toss another artifact and make your combo go. It would get multiple other Grand Prix top 8s in that deck in 2011 and 2014, and right now it's actually seeing a bit of a revival of sorts, and actually finished just outside of the top 8 at Grand Prix Prague just 3 months ago, so the Welder may not be done yet. At number 3, we have our final card that gave us a glimpse of Kal Adesh, Chandra's parents, Pia and Kran Nalaar. While they were thought to be dead, Pia Nalaar was recently spoiled, so at least she is alive, but this version of the parents saw some considerable play at premier events in both Modern and Standard. The card is incredibly efficient, giving you 4 power, 2 of which has flying, for 4 mana, making spot removal pretty bad against them, and then it can even throw artifacts at creatures or players if you need them to. Like the other Origins cards on this list, it made its debut in the Blue-Red and Soul Artifact deck that was briefly in Standard when cards from M15 to Magic Origins were both legal in the format, but unlike the other cards on this list that were in the In-Soul Artifact deck, its career wasn't over once In-Soul Artifact rotated out of Standard, where it appeared in top 8s in many other decks too, including Jeskai Midrange, Rakdos Dragons, Mardu Midrange, and Mardu Green. It was just a great finisher in many, many decks. But it has also made a splash in Modern, where it has made top 8s in 3 different decks. Jeskai Splinter Twin, which unfortunately is a banned deck now, a Court of Calling Toolbox deck, and most recently, just 2 weeks ago, in the Red-Green Valakut Through the Breach deck at Grand Prix Indianapolis. It is also seeing some play in Jund, and has gotten close to top 8ing in those lists as well. Chandra's parents are likely to continue to see play and make their resume even better. At number 2, we have Blade Splicer. This list has a lot of creatures who make tokens on it, but funnily enough, none of them made it to last week's MTG Top 10, which was about cards that make tokens. Anyway, Blade Splicer is another creature who makes tokens and is extremely efficient because of it. It makes a 3/3 Golem token when it comes into play, and the Splicer is a Golem Lord of sorts and gives all Golems first strike, so as long as the Splicer is in play, the Golem it makes has first strike too, and that's pretty amazing value. The Splicer saw play in the Artifact aggro deck of Scars of Mirrodin block that ran Tempered Steel, which gives all of your artifact creatures +2/+2, so it pumped all of its artifact creatures, and it was in the top 8 of Pro Tour Nagoya in 2011 in a deck built around Tempered Steel. In Standard, it made its way into one of the most dominant decks of any Standard ever, Caw-Blade. It also saw play in Birthing Pod decks, Black-White Token decks, and Green-White aggro decks, among others. It made its premier event debut in Modern anyway, in the top 8 of a blue-white control deck that ran Restoration Angel at Grand Prix Lyon in 2012, who could blink the Splicer and make more golems that way. It also saw play in the very powerful Caw-Blade deck, while also putting up a top 8 in a Jeskai midrange deck. So the Caw-Blade deck sort of was ported to Modern briefly before things got banned out of it. These days, it shows up in a Modern Hate Bear decks, which it has recently managed 3 top 8s in as recently as 2 weeks ago, in fact. The deck similarly runs both Restoration Angel and Flicker Wisp, which allows you to get even more golems. Blade Splicer is a true multi-format all-star, and it will certainly continue to finish in the top 8 of Modern events. But it wasn't good enough for number 1. Can you guess what is? If you want to show that you do, you could pause the video and post your guess in the comments. So let's go ahead and move to number 1, which is Stoneforge Mystic. This card is ridiculous, and it blows every other card on the list out of the water. Stoneforge Mystic had to get banned out of Standard. Bannings in Standard are pretty rare, and it also had to get banned out of Modern. If it weren't for those two things, its numbers would be even more impressive. The Mystic was powerful because she drew you a card, generally a powerful equipment like Batterskull, and then she could cheat it into play for only 2 mana. It wasn't unheard of to play a Stoneforge Mystic on turn 2 and then cheat the Batterskull into play for only 2 mana. And the Batterskull is a 4/4 with Vigilance and Lifelink because it has living weapon, so it makes a creature when it comes into play. Basically, everyone played Stoneforge Mystic before it got banned. It was abused to the fullest extent in the Cobblade decks of 2011, the deck that got it banned. At Pro Tour Paris that year, 5 of the top 8 were Cobblade decks, and all 8 decks ran at least 1 copy of Stoneforge Mystic. That's pretty broken. And in all the various research I've done for this series, I've never seen another card get 8 top 8s at a single Pro Tour. The deck continued to run amok, amassing a huge number of Grand Prix top 8s, but was finally banned on July 1st of 2011. Stoneforge Mystic didn't disappear, though, and it is so powerful that it sees play regularly in Legacy today, where it has top 8 in a huge number of decks, including Death and Taxes, Miracles, Bant Control, and Jeskai Control. It saw its most recent top 8 3 months ago at Grand Prix Prague, and it will continue to amass top 8s in Legacy. Well, that does it for this week's MTG Top 10. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to click the like button. It helps more people see it if you do. If you have any questions or comments about the list, or even things you'd like me to see me do an MTG Top 10 on, make some suggestions in the comments. You could also suggest maybe some Artificers from Kal Adesh who you think could break into this list. If you want to make sure you get an MTG Top 10 each and every week, don't forget to subscribe. Thanks for watching.